Good evening, everyone. Richard Rich, 100 Oliver Drive, Bristol. Some of you have gotten to know me. I've been a big supporter of the arts and technology concept that the Chamber originally put forward a while back. And I've been following it pretty closely for a number of months now. I see, and I'll just give you my interpretation of where I think you guys are at. I see this group as determining the feasibility of the Planning Commission's recommendation. They've got a direction. A bunch of folks like me stood up and said, we think this is a good idea. They went with it, which I think is great, but obviously there are a lot of logistical issues. There's a bucket load, quite frankly. We all know that. And that's what we have to figure out. Is this feasible? Is this really workable? And while I love this idea of this Arts and Technology Center, I don't want, as a taxpayer in Bristol, I don't want a financial nightmare to occur. I imagine and I hope something that can support itself. And in addition to, day-to-day operations, it can support itself or pay back on some of the work that will need to be done. It does need new boilers, yeah. I've been down there. And also just to make, just so that you know, and I want to hope serve as a resource to this group, I worked for the Board of Ed for 2 years in a temporary interim position. And I worked as an energy manager for the Board of Education. And I was keeping track of the energy consumption of all the schools in Bristol this 2-year period during the transition while we were building the new schools and closing the old schools. And in that 2-year period, I got very familiar with all the schools, the new and the old ones, and how they use energy, which ones are good, which ones are not good, and got very familiar with the condition, and also the folks that work there. I still acquainted with the folks at the Board of Ed that took care of those buildings, that got very familiar with them, and I would imagine those would be a resource for us as well. There's probably a set of drawings there at the Board of Ed. I don't know if they went over to Public Works or not when the building was in transition, but I see that's something that we will need. And I know there's a heap of messed up drawings in the custodian's office in the basement, but generally the Board of Ed kept another set. And there was sets of all buildings at the Board of Ed. I don't know where that's at, but I imagine that's something you're going to need to lay your hands on, and that I'm sure that they'd be happy to transfer. I know as they divested themselves of school buildings, the Prince either went to whoever bought the building or went to trash, I think, unfortunately, in some instances. So, but I think that'll be a needed resource down the road. And just with regard to your process, as far as establishing these groups, like Ellen suggested, I think that all makes perfect sense. I think that finance is of critical importance. We need to see if this flies money-wise. Can this thing look to break even at some point and pay for itself down the road? And I think a rather detailed financial feasibility study is kind of what's in order. But I think that that's something that's doable within this group, that, once again, from drawings, how much square footage do we really have to rent? Because this number, this 96 or 100,000 square feet is an overall number. It's far different from rentable space. And so feasibility study to establish finances, how much space can we really rent? And then tagging some numbers with that. What would incubator businesses pay? What would co-working people pay? What can some of our nonprofit arts organizations afford? What would an artist pay? And attaching numbers to all those and coming up with a better financial feasibility, an idea for the field. And then we'll know. I mean, then we'll really know. And to me, that's almost the first thing, because if that doesn't make financial sense, if the difference or the gap is too big, then we have to look at some other ideas. So that would be just my suggestion. And as I said, I'm a resource to help this committee. I live here in town. Ellen knows where I live.
Thank you, Richard. Is there anybody else from the community who would like to speak? Cheryl?
Hello, my name is Cheryl Barb. I'm 52 Belleden Gardens Drive in Bristol, Connecticut, and I would like to thank the Planning Commission for recommending that this property be placed on the National Register of Historic Places. most people think of history, think of something that you did in the past. But really, truly, historic preservation has to do with the present and the future. How do you take an older building and make it fit for the future? There's a lot of talk of how, right now, how we're going to use the building. We're trying to think of, what can we put in there? But I really believe that the first step is to say, what is it in the building that we need to preserve? And the type of architect that you pick is very important, that this committee recommends and picks people that are skilled in older buildings. This is going to tell you what you can do with the building. If you take a modern architect and a modern developer that is not used to dealing with older buildings, you're going to find that you could probably a conflict down the road because you're trying to list a property on the National Register. This is American cultural heritage. Okay? These people take what you do in a building. If you rip out a design detail because you want to do something modern, that's going to impact whether you can eventually get that nomination. And that takes almost a 2-year process. So I'm going to say from the get-go that first step is that you get a preservation architect in the building, you do a preservation assessment that tells you what is it that we need to keep and what is it that we can play with. What is it that makes this building important that we need for the future? How can we add to that, or do we can play with it? This is very important because your plan for whatever you do, when you present it and it goes to Washington, D.C. for the National Register, you're competing against the nation of other people who want these tax credits and want these things that can assess the building, help the building. Ellen, you mentioned that the pointing is coming out. Okay. Well, if you say, I am approaching to place this building on the National Register, and guess what? The pointing is coming out. What can we do? Maybe we can get a stabilization grant. Okay, and we're planning to put it on the National Register. You call in the Connecticut Trust and say, who in the state has had an old building like this, and what did they do? And has their advice before we go off in dreamland to say we want to do all these functions. I think it's really important that you do what the library did, which Francine Petosa did with the public library. That was a really good modern adaptation for an old building. She went out and got a preservation architect. Okay, that will go a long way, make things work a lot smoother. And if you come up with a consistent preservation plan, and the State Commission knows that, the Preservation Trust knows that, you have other buildings in town, not just this one, not just this school, but many schools, you start that process of knowing how to go about doing that as a preservation project. Okay, doors will open. But we're not used to doing that here in Bristol. We're really not. And other places are, and I just wish you all would. Thank you.
Have we set the 3-minute rule yet?
Oh, I forgot. There's a 3-minute rule.
Sean Riss, 53 Casper Road. I didn't go to both of the planning meetings, but I did go to the Saturday one. From what I can recall, nobody really wanted to have housing in the building. I don't know if that was brought up at the previous meeting or not, but I think if you're talking about going in possible different directions, maybe it would be a good idea that if you have different plans when you're done, rather than trying to focus on one plan, you let the citizens decide what they want to do in the end, because that would be the only way they'd be able to escape any scrutiny, because people are really passionate about what goes on in this building. I think historic preservation is my personal thing about it. If it's going to be on the tax rolls, I like to see it, preserved the way it is, use it for city office, or use it for, I specifically said a veterans welcoming center, which I think would really be ideal because of the Veterans Park right there. And that's about it. Use my time forward. Thank you.
Let's pass that time on to the next city council meeting.
That's right.
Yeah. Excellent. Any final seconds?
163 Goodwin Street. First of all, I want to thank you for being here and taking this task on. Let's see. Second of all, I should write things down here. One point I wanted to make was, yes, I do appreciate you meeting at the time that you're meeting, because then it makes us very accessible to the public so that people who would like to participate, they have that opportunity. So whereas some other city business is being conducted in the afternoon when people are working, I do appreciate this being available here in the evening. I would like to participate in this process. Second, we have city employees who may be able to do a lot of this work. There are costs associated with that, but I think our city employees are pretty good at what they do. And I think we would respect them and honor them by giving them an opportunity to do some of the legwork you're talking about. I know there are costs associated with that, but there could be costs associated with this anyhow. And I don't think, third, I don't think you should fear, the financial aspect of this at all. All right, you're doing a rough draft on paper. You're getting things done. All right, if you're going to not brainstorm, but you're going to put all kinds of restrictions on this from the get-go, I think you're not doing a disservice. I think you're not doing a service to the citizens nor to yourselves, because then you're limiting yourself. So, and the third thing is, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I really think it's important you do your homework. All right, there is a plan out there already. People should be familiar with it when you show up for the meeting. All right, to start the discussion all over again by saying we're going to consider putting this out for an RFP or we're going to sell the building, it's not what the Planning Commission came up with. I think that is just respecting part of the process. There's going to be a conflict about what you want to do with this. I think you should iron that out and figure out where you want to go with it. But right now, I think your charge is to come up with something that's going to work as some kind of a center for the citizens of Bristol. And I think there's plenty of literature on that. And the building's there. You take a look at it, you evaluate it, and you come up with a plan for it. So, and I think you're all fully capable of doing that. I just think that you need to have the right spirit, and I think you need to have the right MO right from the get-go to make this thing happen. So, good luck. I'm looking forward to this process. I think we have a great opportunity here, and I'm looking forward to see what you come up with. And I will be very accessible and open to having that further conversation with you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So at this point, I'll open it to the members of the commission. We've heard a lot. We have a lot. We are doing homework. Does anybody feel that they're ready to commit to working in one particular area, as discussed earlier, or would you like to take the next couple of weeks to look at everything and then make those decisions with a better grasp of the material that's been presented, with more coming, and have that conversation and start those committees in May?
What about if we think about till next meeting and inform you and Henry of some of our interests, and then you can pick from there?
I obviously want people to be working in the areas in which they have an interest and have some expertise to lend. As we've heard in many different ways tonight, we are not looking to recreate the wheel. So let's do this from a position of strength where we're operating with everybody feeling comfortable with what we have in front of us. Jim, did you have something?
When Mr. Rich was talking, it reminded me that it might be part of the uses. I think you have a subcommittee section around use cases or uses with financial. There is the building internal, and then there is the grounds external. That committee could deal with both, or we could split those. It's probably best to keep them together, but we certainly can't forget that there's an external grounds as well as an internal.
Right, and the planning recommendation does cover both.
Right.
Thank you for that. Cheryl?
Just wanted to clarify, you did say that other people that are not on the commission could work on these committees. Derek Sezolinsky has mentioned to me that he'd like to be part, so I'm going to share with this so that he can see what committee he'd like to.
Fine. Yeah, and we'll have that on the website as well. Any comments over here? Because the first person who says they want to serve on something is in charge of that, just so you all know. I think we're all out of that because nobody's saying
That'll get
anything.
real quiet. I certainly would like to be part of the uses area.
Okay.
I would be interested in the conditions assessment.
Okay. If anybody anybody wants to email either of us, we will continually update the website piece. If you do know of other people who are not here tonight that would like to be an active and contributing member with these circles, we are not keeping this work within this panel. We are opening it up, and anybody is welcome to join. So please pass the word and have them contact Councilman Martin or myself. We are both on the city website, phone numbers and emails. They can just send us something real quick and let us know, and we will keep that and track that for the next month. So for the next meeting, which is...
So we can actively recruit other members to
Yeah.
help us and...
Oh, here it is. Our next meeting is Monday, May 5th. 7 p.m., and for that meeting, we will be in the meeting room, and it will be posted accordingly. We will be looking for the members of the task force to come forward with their interest areas and any kind of preliminary information that they'd like to bring to start that conversation. We may even, if there's room available, do breakout groups that night. And again, let the word go forth to the members of the public, anybody who's interested in our very rudimentary beginnings of facility conditions assessment, and then the end uses, and then historic preservation, all of which are going to be evaluated with fiscal impacts. Please let them know that they need to let us know, and we will keep them in the loop and expand our email distribution list, as well as the postings that are available on the website. Is there any other business that any of the task force members would like to bring to the forefront before we adjourn?
Just one thing, do we want to go ahead and schedule a walkthrough of the facility, external and internal?
I would like to do that sooner rather than later, but I'd like to speak with Public Works to find out who they can send over, and I'd like it to be someone who could maybe speak to some of the issues inside as well, especially boiler and heating issues. I'd like to go there and know those numbers while we're there so that we can have some substance to that walkthrough. So if everybody was so inclined, I can get some dates out. I mean, are people looking more available after 5 o'clock would be a preference for everybody? Okay. And then we'll look for some of them. Yes, Cheryl.
I'm not sure if Peter Fusco also did the Boulevard, but his name comes a lot when we're dealing with HVACs and boilers and so forth. So if we can ask the Board of Ed who they have, it might end up being Peter, but she'd be part of that tour too.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much for everyone's participation. And